Hello everybody, welcome to Fruitful Trees. I am here with the man, this is Gary Zill. We're at Zill's High Performance Nursery and we're going to ask him a whole bunch of questions today. I'm going to put their link below. They do have mangoes currently during mango season for sale here, retail, and they have trees wholesale, so go to your local nursery and make sure you get some of these amazing mango trees. Gary, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Well, I kind of enjoy it. You get me started talking about mangoes, I don't know when to quit. I hope it's been informative. There's a whole lot to know about mangoes. I'm still learning. And yeah, well, I appreciate you being interested, and I hope people enjoyed the talk.
All right, everybody, here we are with Gary Zill at Zill's High Performance Nursery. Hi, Gary. Thanks for coming on the show.
All right. Well, you're welcome.
Gary, there are so many people that love your mangoes and all your other different fruits and your trees. Can you tell us how you're doing here with the inventory and what people can look forward to in the near future?
Yeah, what we've done, we purchased an expansion of the property that's going to gives us the opportunity to grow about 50% more trees. Last year we planted over 170,000 seeds. Now from the time you plant that seed until it's ready to go in a 3-gallon pot, usually is a while, and then by the time you can sell it in a 3-gallon pot, depending on the market, right now it's been crazy, but normally it's at least a year. So now what we have in our inventory right now is a result of the trees that we planted summer before this summer, last summer. That was the first time we really grew a huge quantity, half again as much as we normally can grow. So right now our inventory is really getting caught up. We've been selling a lot of trees this year, had very good sales all summer, all spring, and still, if you look out at the nursery, we have a lot of trees sitting out there, especially 3-gallon, but we've been putting some in 7-gallon pots. We got probably, 15, 20,000, about 15,000, maybe more, 7-gallon trees that are growing very nicely. Oh gosh, the numbers in 3 gallons is pretty impressive. So I expect that further on this year, in the fall, have some really nice, much bigger inventory because we're finally getting caught up. It's taken us, like I say, a year from the time we planted a huge number of seeds last year, and this year we're doing about the same. So we should have a very good inventory next year as well. And the trees, we're able to do some changes in our fertilizers and applications with mainly that, and I think we're going to get some nice looking trees here.
All right, well, thank you for letting us know all that. So you said you're using new fertilizers for your potted trees. Is this something you discovered over the years, or do you switch often?
Well, I've just we've actually cut back a lot on the amount of fertilizer we're using more than anything else, and getting them a little bit less nitrogen. And we always have to be careful with the micronutrients. And in fact, anybody that's growing mangoes in, they get trees from us, depending on where they go, we like them to do well. They need to be sure and give them enough the micronutrients. Manganese is usually can be a problem more than anything else, but you just have to watch and try to figure out. I know the University of Florida has some, Florida Extension has some good information on fertilizers as well, on leaf analysis and things like that for what mangoes need.
Okay, so now in trimming trees, if you trim a big tree and you want to keep it, let's say 10 feet or 11 feet, eventually, if it's a natural big tree like a Valencia Pride or something, will that mess with the fruit production?
Yes and no. First of all, it's not going to let your trees get bigger than you want them to be. Start pruning them when they're small. There's a lot been said about this, and it's all very true. The fact is that my experience has been when a tree gets really big, when I say really big, say it's got a trunk diameter of 10 inches and the thing's 25 feet tall and you can't reach the fruit with a picker very well, you better cut it way back, more than you want to, because the next year you're going to look at it and you're going to say, oh damn, I should have cut this thing further back, because it's going to grow very vigorously. The root system is big The root system's got a lot of nutrients stored up in it, produces gibberellic acid that stimulates growth as well. And because of all that's going on in the root system, it's going to push that top to grow. If you've got really big trees and you want to cut them back, take the tops out of them, if you can. Take them lower than your heart can let you, because they're going to come back fast. If it's a big tree, say that it's 25 feet tall and you want to be able to drop it down to 10 feet, well, you're going to have to take it down to maybe 7 or 8 feet.
What if it's 10 and you want to keep it at 10 long term?
If it's 10 and you want to keep it at 10, every year, see, the best thing to do is to just not let the trees get away from you. Every year, even if the tree's a little smaller than you want it to get eventually, when the fruit come off, trim it. Trim it back. If, say, the tree's 6 feet tall and it said it had a crop, well, there you can just go and shape it. The best thing to do, at least trim a little bit to get all of the dead bloom spikes off. That's where your fungus sleeps. And it'll wake up when the rain starts. It will produce spores, anyway, it's like the contagious of the anthracnose that you don't want. And take a little bit of that off. If the tree's, say, 7 feet tall and you can keep what's the size you want, take a foot off of it every year, depending. But take it back to the size that you want and a little less. Get one flush of growth out on it. This is the ideal, if you can work this. One flush of growth on it and have it stop. Sometimes they don't if it's a real vigorous tree. You may have to take more off of it, let it come back. The whole idea is that you want to have as mature leaves as you can have on the tree in the winter. Because the older the leaves are, the more inductive, well, the more easily for cold weather or other climate changes to induce flowering. And if it's young, tender, new growth, they just won't flower. I don't care how cold it gets.
Okay.
Well, I won't say that, but they're very unlikely. You're not going to be happy with your tree. So my advice is, as soon as you can as you get the fruit off the tree, do your pruning then. The small tree, shape it up. Get it to be the shape you want. If you want it low and spreading, or if you want it shaped like a Christmas tree. But do the pruning as soon as you can. And don't be afraid. You're not going to hurt a mango tree to prune it. Unless you prune it a lot and then over-fertilize it. They don't like that. But a small amount of fertilizer right after they're flowered. After you get the fruit off of them. And that's really, once they start fruiting, that's my preferred time to give them any form of nitrogen to grow. Now, having said that, I've learned that calcium moves pretty slowly in the trees, and I like to start putting the calcium. I use calcium, shortages of calcium and boron can be a problem, even though you think there's a lot of it in the soil. It may not be moving in the tree. It only moves in the transpiration stream, which means it only moves where your fruit, you want to get it in the fruit. It's not a problem getting it in the leaves, because the leaves are evaporating water all the time. But you want to get it in the fruit, and it's not that easy to do. And the only way it really moves in there is where water is evaporating from your mango. So you want to get I use just gypsum, calcium sulfate, and boron. I just get borax from the grocery store. There are other forms of borax. I have boron, I don't care. But don't be afraid to use it. They require as much boron as they do copper. And you can, they say be careful with it, but they need some. And I like to put the gypsum and calcium sulfate out on my trees that I'm wanting fruit off of, starting in October, November, a little bit. Maybe a tree that's 6 or 8 feet tall. Give it, if it's a newly planted tree, it's got a trunk maybe 2 inches in diameter. Give it sprinkle about a half a cup of gypsum around it, and maybe a couple of tablespoons of borax or boron of some kind. And then go back again and do it in, say, November. By the time they start flowering, you can wait till then. But once the fruits start getting some size to them, it's really kind of late. It needs to be in the wood, in the trunk of the tree, and moving.
Now, I've seen some of your trees at an old property you had, Zill's property, and they're really, really wide. big, long, wide trunks, branches.
Yeah, spreading out.
So if somebody's going to keep a tree pruned, if you keep a tree skinnier, I mean, the mangoes are growing towards the end of those
They're
branches.
always out on the tips of the branches.
So what's the advantage of growing them that wide? I mean, would it be more, if the branches coming out of the tree are smaller, wouldn't it make an advantage? Is there any advantage to keeping the tree skinnier or wider to get more fruit on a wider tree, or not necessarily?
Well, it's all the tree surface one way or the other. You got a big diameter tree and it's down low. It's got a lot of surface area out there that'll be tips of the branches that are down low. It all depends on how crowded you want to plant the trees. If you got only 1 or 2 trees that you want to grow and you got a lot of space, you can keep it top and let them get as broad as they want, because you're still going to get branches fruiting out there. And I'm not sure, but I'm kind of almost thinking that horizontal branches tend to flower easier. But that I'm not. Don't take that to the bank or anything. But I do know that your question is everybody that's got trees in a grove or anything like that, you want them shaped like a topped Christmas tree. Come up at an angle, take the top out. Sun is their food. Fertilizer isn't their food. Fertilizers are vitamins and minerals, but they feed on light. If they don't get enough light, you're not going to get a crop. So take that in mind when you're pruning. And that's what I say. As far as pruning goes, ideally I wouldn't want the mangoes to be the fruit to be any higher than you can reach with a picker, and it's just the time it takes and everything else, and the care. It's a homeowner, if they've got a tree in their backyard and they can go out every year and trim it a little bit, get all the dead flowers off of it, dead blooms off of it, they're going to have a lot easier time keeping their fruit clean. And the more sun they can get by pruning them, you're not going to lose a lot if you time it right. And believe me, if you don't let the trees get ahead of you, that's a big deal.
Sure.
This is another reason why I've been so interested in dwarfing rootstock, because I get tired of pruning my trees, and I've really let a lot of them get away from me as well. It's easy to do, because especially some varieties that grow real fast.
So somebody who's going to stay on top of the pruning and they're going to plant some trees, I know it depends on the variety, but what distance would you recommend them planting the trees? Or what's the closest they can get away with that they could still get enough sunlight?
Yeah, well, I mean, I have some trees in my yard that I planted about 15 feet apart, but they're on dwarfing rootstocks. And that's going to be a long time before they get in each other's way. But a rather fast-growing tree, you're going to need to give it about, I would say, 20 feet. Some people plant them closer. They go, say, 20 by 25 or 15 by 25. So they can get a crop of fruit, and then later on, they just hedge them. They'll have a hedge of mangoes. And then they'll have room to move or drive in between.
So if two trees are next to each other and there's no other trees surrounding them, maybe the middle part where they're touching won't get as much sunlight, but all the other 3 sides of both those trees would be fine, do you think?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if they're out in the open, of course. But if you got 2 trees that are close together, you can always just, from the top down, kind of cut and give them some light. It all depends. I mean, if they're 10 feet apart and they've been growing together for a long time, it's going to be, I don't know if it's even worth the trouble to try, if they're just really big trees growing together. Or you may just have to be really drastic and cut them back and not count on getting a crop that year or that following year. And sometimes you may have to cut a trees back severely, and then the next year cut them back again to get them under control. I've seen that done. I was amazed at a tree I saw at Alex Salazar's place that it had a trunk like, 12, 15 and bigger in diameter, and he cut it off as a stump. And it sprouted out, and I don't know how I had the time to do it, but he put grafts all over it. And then had to prune them back a couple times. He ended up, I haven't seen it, that was a year or so ago, and he ended up with a nice looking tree that was productive. However, that tree's never going to heal over. that dead wood in the center is going to never heal over. And if there's ever a lot of wind, it's going to break off. It's just going to, those branches are going to peel off. So it's interesting, and it might be worth the trouble if you've got the time. But I've had some people say, I remember it was Carl Campbell. He's well, more than retired. He passed away a few years ago, but he knew a lot about trees, and somebody was asking him, he said they bought a big yard, bought a house with some really big mango trees on it. What should I do? He told them how big they were. He says, you got to just cut them down and start over. He says, because you take those trees back, and they're just going to keep growing and growing and growing. Now, unless you want to try and go to all the trouble to top work and re-top work. And I took some trees that I wanted. I had my brother Walter top work for me. They were way too big, and I thought, well, we'll top work. I'm going to change them to some other. By top work, I mean cut them back, put other grafts on them, grow them out. Problem is that when you do that, you still have to work with a fairly decent sized branch, or else you cut it back to a stump. And so you put your grafts on them, they're going to come out very vigorously because they're put on a good sized tree. And all of the ones that I did that with, within 2 years, were almost as big as they had been before they'd been cut back. Wow. And to me, they were way too big. Well, that was about 3 years, and I just never got around to pruning them back like maybe I should have, because it's, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I've got too much to do to keep track of everything.
Sure. What's your opinion of multi-grafting when people put more than one variety on a tree?
You can do that as long as you know a little bit about the growth habit of the trees. In other words, don't try to put a Julie on anything other than, say, maybe an ice cream, because they both grow as dwarfs. If you want to put a Valencia Pride, don't bother putting anything else. Maybe a Zill.
So what you're saying is the varieties you do choose to multigraft should be similar in growth size.
And growth habit.
Growth habit.
Sure. Growth habit, and some varieties are more bushy. A cherry tree is more branchy and more dense. A kit tree is more open, and they're going to look kind of strange, but you can do it. I mean, I know a person in California who has a small yard and has 2 or 3 trees grafted on his on one bush, and he'll have one branch of one variety. But they're out there, trees grow so slowly, and it's just like a different planet out there. It's a different
Sure. And growing in pots, a lot of the people, they don't have room to grow a lot of big trees, and I know this is one of the reasons why you're trying to dwarf some of the trees for the people. If people decide to continue growing in pots, how long could they go on a mid-sized tree where eventually they're going to have to get out of the pot and get it in the ground?
Well, it all depends on your root system. Of course, anytime you're growing a tree in a pot, the biggest thing you have to worry about is going on vacation or just forgetting to water them, because they're completely helpless, and they can die very quickly. Mangoes can probably the most thrifty as far as water use of any fruit tree, but still, they can't just be left to dry out. You leave a tree in a pot really a long time, and what happens, usually they just get root bound. If you go to plant the tree, pull it out of a pot. If it's been in a 15-gallon pot in your back porch, and it's been there for 2 or 3 years, I don't. You're gonna, if you want to go ahead and plant that tree in the ground, when you take it out of the pot, take your clippers and trim the roots quite a bit. Okay. Now, if you plan on keeping a tree in a pot longer than that, you might. If they'll stay in the pot long enough, they'll just split a plastic pot open with the roots. So I really don't know how long you can keep a regular mango tree. A lot depends on how fast the thing grows, too. That's a whole other subject. I've been working with trying to find rootstocks at dwarf trees for probably 20 years. And believe me, if you think taking a lot of time to get new mango varieties takes time, dwarf looking for rootstocks can be very disappointing. But I've got a couple that I think that I would like to try growing more of them in larger containers and see how they do. I've got 2 rootstocks that I have a few that we can work with, and a few others that I'm looking at as well. And there's some where I know that the question I'm having is how many we can grow, because that's you just can't. I can't get that many good rootstocks right now. I hope to in the future, but right now I've been really surprised actually with the popularity of these new varieties that I selected. I just set out, and that was like, it was over 20 years ago. I decided I was just going to start. I got the idea, I think it was back in 1990 at a mango symposium in Miami, that some of the people from Australia were saying how they were just noticing from the aroma of the leaves that they could pick out a particular, it's a Southeast Asia type of aroma of the plants. And I thought, aha, I'll bet you I can do that with a lot of different flavors. And I did. And I just decided maybe instead of doing all the hand pollination and everything else, I'll just plant out a whole bunch of seeds and look for these flavors, aromas that I'm wanting to see if we can find something exciting about, and plant out a lot of trees. And ended up with, well, there's a kind of a list of, you know, all the varieties that I finally ended up keeping. And some of them have been very exceptional and adapted where I grow the trees. By and large, the main reason I selected them was that they didn't have jelly seed, which means they really had it was easier to keep have a good quality fruit for without, you know, too many details, and just flavor. I was looking for flavor, and ended up with some exceptionally good flavored, and a lot of variety, a lot of different varieties. There's Southeast Asia. I think some of these Southeast Asian varieties that I have for ripe, not for green. I'm not going to try to compete with some of these green Thai or Vietnamese varieties, but somewhat that you know, before they may have been around, but before I made these selections, we had Philippine, Florgon, Fairchild, Cambodiana, one they call Saigon, and there probably were a number more, but I didn't know of them. And I ended up making some selections. That was a pretty easy one to pick out for the aroma. And you know, we've got the oh gosh, what we call sweet tart, which is a tart mango, but also sweet, very good. What we call Kathy, which is another one. What we call Venus, which is a very, very large late mango. And one we call cream, oh gosh, buttercream, yeah, buttercream. That's another really, really good one. And all 4 of those I think are better than any of the mangoes that I was aware of, anyway, by far, and any of them that I really. Now, there are some others. I don't mean to talk about the Southeast Asian types. There's some very good ones of those as well. But sure, of the ones I've selected, I think they're of the kind of the stronger flavor types. They're really good.
Now, name means a lot. Some of your mangoes, because of your mango program, had a number and a row that haven't gotten named yet. Right. So why do you wait a certain amount of time before naming certain mangoes that are released, as opposed to just naming them right away? Just trying
to decide what's a good descriptive name. Most of the ones that we've named, actually, some people say this is this. I didn't name. I don't think I named any of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We just thought, oh, well, that's good, or this is good, and that's good. But I do know that naming them, it makes people easier to remember. I mean, who's going to remember 015? 015 is a very good, it's a vigorous tree, a very good mango that it's a seedling of Jakarta, which got its flavor from the Indian variety grown commercially in India, been around here in Florida forever, was my mother's favorite mango, called Pahari.
In Jamaica, they call it Bombay. And I know that tree, one of the parents, I don't know which, had to have been that because I know where the seed came from, and I know where the only possible way it could have gotten that particular aroma. And the one we called Sunrise and 015 are both seeds of the Jakarta, and they got that flavor from their grandmother, Bombay.
So you said 015 is Bombay and Jakarta?
Well, Jakarta was a parent of the 015 and of the Sunrise. And they both have that distinctive aroma and flavor that the Jakarta has. And by the way, Jakarta is a wrong name. It's not from Indonesia. It is a Indian type. And the way it got that name was kind of crazy. My first wife, it was her favorite mango, and I don't know why, she always called it Jakarta. And I said, no, it's the Pahari seedling. And finally I just said, oh hell, we'll just call it Jakarta, and the name is stuck. And I should rename it something else. And speaking of names, I'm not real crazy about the one we call Super Alfonso.
I was just going to ask you about that one.
Because the first time I tasted that mango, the first year, it had one fruit on it, and I was watching it and watching it. I thought, well, I better pick it because it's starting to show these lenticels. And I kept it, and I thought, I remember it was 10 days. Normally, it used to be anyway, 10 days is a long time for a mango to get ripe if you picked it at the fully mature stage. And I thought, it's taking it 10 days to get ripe. I don't know if it's going to be any good or not. I cut into it, and it was the best mango I tasted all summer. And I said, oh my God, this is India. That was the name I was going to give it, India. Nobody liked that name. And I still would prefer to call it India's Gift because to me, it is the essence of Indian mangoes, Indian flavors, as much as any other one. And there's some really good Indian mangoes and some really good selections I've made of that. But to me, it has that flavor, if it's grown right, picked at the right time, because you can't let it, well, you got to get enough calcium in it. It can get jelly seed real bad if it's left to tree ripen and given too much nitrogen but if you grow it right, and it's getting enough sunlight, it is a phenomenal mango. Also, the other thing is that you can pick it mature enough to where it ripens real well after 2 weeks at a high temperature. I learned this sometime a number of years ago. We were having a rare fruit council meeting in West Palm, and I picked a bunch of these, and I wanted them to ripen in time for the meeting, which is going to be a week later. So I put them in a greenhouse area that was covered and closed, and I know the temperature in there was 110 degrees. It was an oven in there. And a lot of those fruit got ripe for the meeting, and a lot of them didn't get ripe for another week. And I was like, this is amazing. So I honestly believe you could put that mango in a container, pick it, put it in a container, ship it to Europe, and if it took 2 weeks to get there, but it has to be somebody who really knows when to pick it, and how to pick it. And it's not something that's easy to do, but it's very interesting about that.
I've been picking mine ripe, and they've been amazing.
Yeah. Well, you've been fertilizing them right, taking care of them right, and not over-fertilizing them. But this is something I thought was very interesting the first time, well, not the first time, but the first time I went to India to look for mangoes. I remember seeing it seemed like a half a mile of tables stacked with mangoes out in the middle of the summer. It was hot. They're in the full sun, and I'm looking at them, and they're starting to shrivel up. They've been sitting there, and you buy one, and it tasted really good. And I'm like, wow, these mangoes aren't getting an overripe taste. And it's amazing to me that I was that familiar with mangoes for that long, and I never realized that, yeah, mangoes get an overripe taste. The greener they are when you pick them, the more time you have from the time they start to get ripe before you have to eat them, before you throw them away, because they get this overripe musty taste. Some mangoes are terrible at that. A Julie mango, if you my father used to say a Julie mango, if it gets ripe and falls on the ground, you better eat it that day because it's not going to make any good the next day. I know of a story where a guy cut his mango trees down. He had a Julie mango tree and he cut it down because he didn't like it. And then he tasted one that was at the right stage to eat it, and he liked the mango. It was too late. I've picked mangoes, Julie's in Costa Rica, way ahead of time, I thought. Let's set them out till they dehydrated almost, and they were very good. The reason we picked them green was because the ones that were turning fully ripe down there in those soil conditions weren't any good.
So all mangoes, well, they'll each have their own likes. Some you can pick green and some you can't, right?
Yeah. Some need to be picked green, or better when they're picked green, or at least as good. And others you have to be pretty careful with. I think Jakarta is one of them that's better to... You can see a little color on the bottom of the fruit. It's going to be a real good mango.
What about sweetheart? I've been seeing that when they get ripe, they ripen unevenly, but if you pick them green, they ripen evenly.
Yeah, and sweetheart's a very forgiving mango. You can get it a little bit early, and it's got enough sugar in it, it's still good. If you've had problems with it ripening unevenly, that can happen. And again, you may need to pick it a little green. Or once you see a few get ripe and you got that problem, start getting the rest of them off the tree, or pick them and give them to your friends. That depends on how big your tree is. And there's others. A real good example is the one we call Valkyrie. Now, that's one we selected many, many years ago from the grove where I grew up. Jakarta is one of them. The Valkyrie is another. That particular mango, you don't want to get it too early. You want to pick it when it's mature. And if even you can wait till you start seeing the fruit getting ripe. But don't try to leave it and extend the season, because they'll get a starchy taste and a bad texture. You got to get them off the tree when they're ready.
It's amazing how the taste can be different.
Mangoes are the most complicated, hard to figure out trees. I almost say you got to have a tree in your backyard and practice picking it and learning about it, because in their vintages, mangoes, I know that you say grapes have different vintages for wines. Mangoes are the same. They're very complex, interesting fruit. I love them.
And the trees also. So all my trees grow one way. The tree we were just talking about, the sweetheart, that tree is growing different than any other. The branches are so heavy that they're like bending so much more. I've never had that with any of my other trees. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's a very productive variety.
Yeah. So how did you get the name Super Alfonso?
Well, Alfonso is the famous, most well-known mango out of India. There are a lot of others. I mean, my gosh, there's a lot of commercial groves. Kesar, and I have a book my uncle sent to my father years ago that has over 100 varieties of mangoes in it. But anyway, Alfonso is, and it's a very, very good mango in India. Here I don't care for it, but the ones I ate in India were pretty good. Very good. And I thought that, I don't remember where we even came up with that name, except that it was like the epitome of a really, really good Indian mango that appealed to everybody. And I'll guarantee you eat one of those grown in India where they grow them, and you're going to like it. And I just thought that this mango was equal.
But no reference to taste or the mango.
Not exactly. Not exactly. And certainly not to appearance. Alfonso is just a yellow mango. Super Alfonso has some color to it and can be quite pretty if it's out on the outside branches and get some good sun on it.
So if somebody's looking for an Alfonso mango, do you tell them, we'll get Super Alfonso, or do you say, well, there's more that, or you'd want more? They're not. How are they related, the Alfonso and the Super Alfonso?
I would say if you really like Alfonso, you're going to really like the Super Alfonso. That's all I can say, because it's as, like I say, to me it's the most, and some people it may be too strong of a flavor. Some people really like the fruit punch. Some people really like, another really good Indian type mango is one we call fruit cocktail.
Yes, excellent.
It's very good and has a nice firm texture.
Excellent. But does the Alfonso taste similar to the Super Alfonso, in your opinion?
The Alfonso, very complex mango. That has a lot of different, and so does the Super Alfonso.
It's wonderful. So I know you got the seedlings from your mangoes. In your program, you had the seedling. You knew which one they were. How did you determine which one was the parent of that? So let's say you had a seedling from, let's say, a Jakarta in your program. You put it here, let's say row, this number. Then you get a mango that tastes pretty amazing. How did you determine which plant, what other mango was the parenting of that mango?
Right. Well, here, I can show you on my list here, like, I would write down when I'd sample a mango, I would write down the aroma. Well, not sampling mango. These selections, as far as deciding what I thought the parent was, were not made by the flavor. They were made by the aroma of the tender leaf. And that's a lot like the aroma of the sap of the mango when you pick it. And you pick a Hayden or a Kent or a Kit or a Tommy Atkins, Irwin, Glenn, all of the prodigies of Hayden that didn't get crossed with something more interesting, you can't tell the difference. It's all going to be the same. What you're getting, though, in your Southeast Asian types, you're getting some very distinctive aromas. Okran's real distinctive versus Namdok Mai. And then on your Indian varieties, there's one type that's more like the Kerry Julie. There's another one more like the Bombay or Pahari. And there's one very distinctive to the Gary mango, which I originally came from a mango called Pettigrew. And those are basically the three. If I left one out here, I mean, here I've got on my list Ambrosia. The sap had an aroma like East Indian. Sweet tart, like actually one of the Southeast Asian types I use called ZIC. I mean, here I have a 720 that was a Kerry seed, and I couldn't say it was any different from a Kerry, the aroma. But there were a lot of Kerry seeds that didn't carry that aroma. When I was in Israel one time, I was walking through a long line of mangoes that were all seeds of Bombay. And only 1 out of 20 or 30 had that distinctive aroma to the fruit and flavor.
So are you saying that you determine the parenting of the seedling based on aroma?
Yes.
So it's not something you plan out. So you put the seedling out there and you don't plan and say, well, I'm going to put it with this one. And you just let it happen. And then when the mango comes, then you decide.
Almost way too far. Way too far. It could have, I mean, granted, the closer they are, the better. But it doesn't necessarily work that way. And to me, I was just looking for flavors. I wasn't going to try to make a particular cross or anything. It's extremely time-consuming, very hard. You make 2 or 3 hand pollinations and you might get 1 fruit set. You work with the nonas, you make a hand pollination, you're going to get 10 or 15 fruit, or trees, I should say.
So other than the aroma, you also, let's say you have an aroma that you're questionable about, you also look at the habits of the tree, right? Is that?
Well, after you plant the seed and wait a good while to watch it grow, yeah, definitely. And just because of the aroma that you think it's going to be what it's going to be like, doesn't necessarily you're going to get what you want by any means. There was some literally I cut into and I just threw it away and actually took a glass of water and rinsed my mouth out. They have a very strong, there's a lot of mangoes are complex.
Sure. And what about in Florida in watering mango trees? Do you think it's necessary to be on irrigation once the trees are established after a couple of years, or do you think it's always important to have water during the drought season?
If you can, it's really important when you first plant the tree. Get it watered. You put it in a pot. You take it out of a pot, put it in the ground. There's not a whole lot of water going to be diffusing from the soil into that. So it's almost like it's still in a pot till it gets a few roots out. You need a few months for it to get, at least. And in the dry season, as dry as it was this spring, a tree that had been planted even the last year might use a little bit extra water. But as soon as you can, I advise keeping the water off of them, because all the water, at least in this part of Florida, it may not be on the other state where you got the problem with sulfur and everything else, but where you're pulling out water out of the, what they call the Biscayne aquifer, you're pulling out of basically a giant sieve of coral, calcium carbonate, basically. You get a trace of calcium carbonate in your water, it builds up in your soil, and your pH starts to go up. It doesn't hurt for a while, but the thing that this was a cause of a big problem of mango decline a number of years ago. Nobody could figure out what it was. And it was basically from overwatering. And the reason is even, people were saying, well, we're growing in this calcareous soil. We've got rock all over and everything else. But your feeder roots are on the surface. And on the surface, especially of an older grove, you got leaf litter, you got basically a lot of organic matter right there on the surface. And when the pH of that goes above 7, you have a real problem with manganese deficiency. And manganese is really important for a mango tree's immune system. And they can become very much more susceptible to pathogens that normally don't bother them. We had this happen 50 years ago in a nursery we had moved to. It had a lot of iron in the water. And we had got an iron deposits on our leaves. We had moved to a new location. And all of a sudden, the trees are gorgeous, and 7-gallon pots started dying back. We couldn't figure out what it was. We had people from the University of Florida, nematologists looking for some. I finally discovered that what we had was a problem with our water having too much iron and the soil getting too high of a pH. Anyway, the reason I'm feeling like I can explain about this is because this was an experience I had. I thought we were going to have to go out of the business because everything was just dying. So we just started treating everything with chelated manganese. Manganese EDTA was what we used. It's not the only form that works. And we had to apply it twice, about a month apart. And trees that we thought were dying just came back like a miracle. And the reason is that the transport system, this active transport, the tree actually burns calories to move the minerals into the roots. And the same molecules, the same system that moves iron into the roots, moves manganese. You get a place where you got too much iron, and then you get too much calcium built up, and to your pH of your soil, organic matter, not in sand, but organic matter, and you're going to get a severe manganese deficiency. And that's what we had. We corrected it with chelated manganese. So I'm going way too complicated maybe, and maybe not everybody wants to hear my story, but this is what you have to be careful with, especially if your water's got a lot of iron and calcium in it. But one way or the other, manganese can become a problem if you're overwater. And I always say mangoes don't need a lot of water. They're very thrifty with water. They're better than citrus, better than anything.
But do they need any water? I mean, do you need to have it on irrigation if you're growing a mango tree out here, in your opinion?
Depends on how big the tree is. I mean, if it's been in the ground a while, I don't think so.
Well, let's say somebody gets a tree, they put a 3-gallon or a 7-gallon in the ground, they water it for the first year or so on a regular basis. It gets established, it fruits maybe even 1 year. After that, do they need to add any extra water at all throughout the year, do you think?
You can watch the tree. Now, it's not a problem if you see leaves starting to drop on the interior. They're going to drop their oldest leaves. The leaves are in the shade and doing them at least good. They're going to get rid of those anyway, and it's not going to hurt them. If you start seeing, the trees start to actually wilt I guess, you know, if he's only been in the ground, say, a year or 2 years, and you have these really dry springs like we had this year, it's not going to hurt to water. But don't just put it on your automatic sprinklers to water all the time. I keep my grass alive in my yard, more or less, and I'm not real concerned about how good my grass looks. But I have a couple of mango trees in my yard, and I have sprinklers on, and it's not hurting them. But if you've got a grove in a place where you just want to grow mangoes and you don't care about keeping your grass alive, you're just as well off, if not better off, not to water during, you know, unless they've been around. Maybe you're asking me questions I've never experienced because I just don't really know. I've never had a problem by not watering trees that have been in the ground after 2 years.
Well, okay, that's good to know. Now, some people say during the drought season or during the time where it is not the non-rainy season, the mangoes, if you don't water them at that point, they won't fruit as much as if you water them at that point.
Well, I mean, I've seen extremes in my place in Costa Rica where it's just so dry that they don't set any fruit. But there's other reasons. There can be pollination. There can be a lot of other stuff. But from what I've heard more from the commercial growers is that you want to water them in the dry season to get some weight. But your fruit's going to be more diluted. It's not that you're getting any more sugar in the tree. Maybe, maybe not. I don't want to say that I'm the last word on that, but I do know that the reason that I've heard has been just to get some size to the fruit. And
sure.
To me, the drier the climate, the drier the conditions, the better flavor of the fruit.
Okay, good to know.
There's no question in my mind about that. Like I say, I have a place in Costa Rica that I'm growing some trees, and there you just always have a long dry season. And the first fruits that we got that hadn't really had any rain at all, they were exceptional. But then the rain started, and it just goes downhill in a hurry.
Sure. So of all the mangoes out there, I know you have different times you've been asked this question. What are your 3 favorite ones currently now and here in 2023? What are your favorite of all the ones you've tasted?
Well, of the ones that I've selected, I'm just going to narrow it down to that. This year, I had a P22. We got to think of a name of that. It was as good as they get. And it's a Southeast Asian type. It's just yellow. But especially surprising this year, as much rain as we've had. If you want a Southeast Asian type like, they say Fairchild was David Fairchild's favorite mango. Well, I don't think he ever tasted one of these. Okay, and I'm no offense to David Fairchild. I'm sure he knows what he's doing or knew what he was doing. But that was one of the best mangoes I ate this summer.
P22.
And it is excellent flavored.
Name's coming soon.
I'm sorry?
A name is coming soon for it.
We're going to have to get a name for it. But that's the row and tree number of it, and it gives you an idea how many we selected from. Another real good one, we just last night had a sweet tart that was just spectacular. Apart from that, yeah, we had a little gem. That's a really good late mango. It's a kit seed. And I'm pretty sure it's a kit crossed with a Julie. I'm not sure, but that's kind of what I would have guessed. I know where the seed came from. Oh gosh. Fruit punch is a really good mango. Very good. A lot of people like that. It's not an overpowering Indian type aroma, but it's really good. Oh gosh, orange sherbet. Orange sherbet is orange sherbet and lemon zest. Hard to say which of those two is a better mango. They're both very good. Orange sherbet's a more compact tree. Lemon zest is going to get out of hand if you don't keep it pruned.
Yeah.
They're both real clean. Although lemon zest, I've heard some problems with this
bacterial black spot.
Bacterial black spot. It's been going around. It's very strange. some years, a couple of years back, it was really bad on a lot of trees, and then this year I don't remember seeing it hardly on anything.
Yeah.
And I think, just like there are insects that are, this is my theory, because I'm just from what I'm seeing, just like I remember a long time ago, whiteflies were really a problem. I was going to spray a tree in my yard, on my backyard, never got around to it, and eventually went away. Something that got took. And this, I think there's some phages, bacteriophages, that are taking care of that bacteria to some extent, and it comes and goes, and it seems like it hasn't been a problem at all this year.
What can people look forward to in terms of trees and also even mangoes? Any new varieties that people can look forward to or anything like that?
Well, I've got a couple of varieties that I'm looking at that I haven't decided whether to, I'm wanting to wait and watch them, see what the fruit are like. Like I say, we just got caught really by surprise, the huge growth and demand for mangoes the last 3 or 4 years. And I'm sure we're going to have a very good supply of mangoes. I mean, I'm looking at what we've got sitting out here and how much they're growing versus how many trees we're selling. And we're definitely getting ahead. We're getting ahead to the point where I'm a little bit, I'm hoping that they don't get so big the wind starts blowing them over next spring. Next summer.
All right, everybody, that was amazing. We will come back here and show you around the farm another time, but we have some other videos that we did here at Zill's. I'm going to put them below with Marcelo. And if you have questions for Gary that you'd like me to ask in the future, please put them below and we'll come back with some follow-up questions. Gary, thank you for all the information you shared today. It's a pleasure to meet you and to talk to you about this great topic that so many people love. So thank you very much for your time.
Well, again, I appreciate you being interested. I appreciate it. I've been amazed at how many people have been interested in all this. So I hope it's been interesting and helpful.
Has it really amazed you? Because you knew you've been amazed with it.
I had no idea. I had no idea. You have no idea how much time I put into just making all these selections. And I remember thinking to myself, well, this is real interesting. I hope people really appreciate it. But it's turned out actually bigger than I ever thought it would. I just wanted to have some new varieties, more flavors for people to try, and boy, they have, and it's really cool.
Well, I've been so blessed because my house is like within a couple of miles of this amazing nursery, so I get to come here and meet you and try your mangoes, but you can try their mangoes all over because your trees are so popular and everyone has them. Thank you for watching this channel. Please subscribe if you want more information about Zill's, mangoes, and all the other information on tropical fruits.